The ICOMOS Philippines Heritage Talks. I'd like to call on Architect Dominic Galicia, the President of ICOMOS Philippines.
Welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see everyone, to see a good crowd, and what I understand is it'll be even a better crowd as the minutes move along. But we need to start because there's a lot to talk about. Just to give you a brief introduction of ICOMOS, to give you an understanding of what ICOMOS means. ICOMOS is the International Council of Monuments and Sites. It's a Paris-based organization that this year celebrates its 50th year. So ICOMOS is one of three professional organizations that assist the UNESCO World Heritage Center in assessing, selecting, and monitoring sites throughout the world that are to be inscribed or are inscribed in the World Heritage List. So I'm sure you're all familiar with sites such as the Ifugao, the Rice Terraces, the 5 Baroque churches such as San Agustin nearby, but I think what's very interesting for us as Filipinos is that the first site on the World Heritage List, which was inscribed by UNESCO, is a cultural heritage, a cultural, what's the term?
Landscape.
Cultural landscape, a cultural landscape, So it's not just a building, it's not just a discrete building, but it's an entire environment. And this is particularly fitting for us, therefore, tonight, that our two speakers are going to be speaking about an aspect that is really something that makes us world class, makes the Philippines world class, cultural landscapes. Our first speaker is Boj Capati, and our second speaker is Susan Aquino Ong. They're both experts in their field. They both represent the caliber of professional expertise, experience in conservation that makes ICOMOS an exciting organization to be part of. So with that, may I ask Boj to begin. By the way, I'd just like to thank NCCA for being so generous and kind in partnering with us in having this event take place here.
So to introduce our first speaker, Boj Capati is an active member of ICOMOS Philippines. He is also a member of Blue Water Consultancy, a firm that provides technical assistance to LGUs, NGOs, and other agencies and companies on sustainable tourism, ecotourism, enterprise development, and environmental education. He finished Masters of Geography on Urban and Regional Planning in Peking University in China in July last year. His specialization is National Park Planning and World Heritage Studies. His presentation on Mount's Iglit-Baco National Park is the subject of his graduate thesis, and was also presented in Germany and in Amherst, Massachusetts. Boj continues to engage in projects of the Mount's Iglit-Baco National Park, including a possible nomination to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Ladies and gentlemen, Boj Capati.
I hope this picture caught your attention. So if you go to Mount Iglit-Baco National Park, this is the typical scenery that you will see. So just like what Ma'am Tracy said, this is a topic of my graduate thesis. I stayed in Mindoro for more than a year, going back and forth, interviewing the Mangyans, the local people, and then the rangers. They're all part of this system that affects the ecosystem of Mount Iglit-Baco National Park. So it's always best to do the thank you before, not after, when everyone is already tired of listening. So I'd like to thank NCCA for the opportunity. So that's me in Amherst. So because of NCCA, I was able to travel and present my paper in Mindoro. So thank you to them. Thank you also to ICOMOS Philippines. Sir Dom has always been encouraging us to actually go out there and talk about Philippine heritage. So this is what we're doing now. And then I'd like to thank also the two Tamaraw experts, Emmanuel Schutz, a scientist from France, and Sir Rodel Boyles, the park superintendent of Mindoro. They were very helpful in drafting my graduate thesis. So yeah. Perhaps it would be best to explain what cultural landscapes are, especially for those who are not very familiar with the term. We start with the word landscape from the Germanic origin Landschaffen, meaning shaped lands. So you know that the land is being shaped by many factors. And a famous geographer named Carl Sauer is the one who has this classic definition of cultural landscape, wherein the culture is the agent and you have the natural area as the medium. If you mix it together, then you form a cultural landscape. So it's not entirely or purely cultural, and it's not purely a natural site. There's actually an intimate relation between the two. So we'll give a good example of Batanes cultural landscape. You would notice that a typical hut in the lowland Philippines will not survive this kind of harsh climate in Batanes, where it's normally passed by lots of typhoons, strong winds. So that's why the bahay na bato or the stone houses are really perfect for this kind of environment. And vice versa, these stone houses won't really survive in the lowlands where it's really hot and there's a lot of earthquakes maybe. And it's not just the house. Let's zoom out. You would see that the settlement pattern is also very suitable for this environment. So you see the houses are actually next to the hill, which again is a natural barrier against typhoons. Okay, let's move on. Another aspect of cultural landscapes, the hedgerows. So, I mean, of course, it's nice. They're not just there to demarcate the family plot. They're also meant to prevent erosion. So again, a typhoon-prone area, you need to preserve the soil, and the lines there actually helps in preventing erosion. And the iconic blow your horn sign, the signages, you cannot replace it every year, every time the typhoon blows them away. They're all embedded in the rocks. So again, these are small things that are manifested in a cultural landscape. So if, please just jot down your questions. There's an open forum later. Okay? So what I just discussed about Batanes now is what we call the surface values. So this is my lecture from graduate school. No? What you see are layered values, but then if you scratch that layer through heritage mapping and archaeology, you will find out that a landscape has so many layers in the past. And if you're able to discover, you get to appreciate the place more. So, by the way, these little circles, no, it's relations, forms, and practices that are interacting. I'll give you an example again to explain these layers of landscape, coming back from the Batanes example. These are called ijangs, or the forts. Perhaps the people at that time, they didn't really know what they were. But archaeologists went and they found out that they may be connected to the Gusuku sites in Okinawa, in the middle picture. There are also forts on top of the hill. And so you see that maybe there's a connection. At the same time, on the picture on the upper left are the boat markers. They probably are evidence that Batanes and the whole of Philippines is actually indeed connected with the whole Pacific migration. So you see, you have the houses that are really nice and the hedgerows. You scratch it a bit and discover another layer. And it probably tells you that Batanes, how Batanes was before. So this is an example. No? Just move forward. Since humans, there are many ways by which humans actually shape the lands. There's a variety of cultural landscapes. The most common is what we call the agricultural cultural landscapes. The Philippine rice terraces is here. The tequila plantation in Mexico is another example. There's also religious cultural landscapes. A good example is Wutaishan in Shanxi province, where the Buddhists built temples with respect to the 5 peaks in the mountains. And it's not just that, the way the temples are actually facing a certain angle of the sun or the moon, it's all part of the cultural landscape. And then the 3 there, which is the most common, are settlement patterns. You have urban landscapes, industrial landscapes, etc. So, but what I'd like to talk about today is something that may be very relevant to the Philippine setting, and this is what we call, I'd like to call indigenous cultural landscapes. Bernard Nichman said in 1992 that where there are indigenous people with a homeland, there are still biologically rich environments. So this is supported by a 2010 study by these 3. They were saying that out of the 128 biologically diverse areas in the Philippines, 96 are actually within the ancestral domain of our indigenous people. That's a very promising, promising idea that there are things that we can actually still conserve and maybe discover. So you see that probably the indigenous culture and biodiversity, there must be a strong link between the two. And what I'm going to introduce now is maybe a possibility that there should be a registry of Philippine indigenous cultural landscapes. And these are some of the places that I imagine or that I know. I'm sure there's more if we could discover them. For instance, the Coron Island and the Tagbanwas, the indigenous fishing practices of Tagbanwas is actually meant to preserve the biodiversity of Coron Island. They also know the caves where the swiftlets, the bird's nests, are found. So I'm not gonna speak more about that. I'm not the expert there. What I'd like to talk about, just an example of this, is the Mount Iglit-Baco National Park and the Mangyan. So I hope that's clear so far. This is the poster that we use for the flyer. This is Mount Iglit. So Iglit-Baco, by the way, is named after the 2 highest peaks in the park. Mount Baco, 2,000-something meters above sea level. No one has reached the summit yet. And this is Mount Iglit. Okay, they call it Mangibok, according to the Mangyan language. So we're going to talk about, this is the second part of my topic now. We're going to talk about how to safeguard a mountain grassland landscape. So I'd like to just let you imagine what mountain grasslands are, no? Because when you think about grasslands, you usually imagine those what you see in Africa, flatlands, no? Whereas if you think about mountains, you actually think of forests and trees. But then this is so unique, a mountain grassland that's found in Mindoro, no? And how to actually manage them. So, more visitors. Okay, let's continue. So what's so special about the Mount Iglit-Baco National Park? So it's already a national park since 1970. It's an ASEAN Heritage Park, it's an IBA, and in 2006 it was added in the UNESCO World Heritage tentative list under the categories of evolution and biodiversity. So biodiversity because, well, it's a site of endemism, meaning there are 35 endemic species, meaning there are plants and animals that are found in the park and nowhere else in the world. One of which is the famous Tamaraw, an endangered species. Last April 2015, it's 405. So it's already steadily going up, but it's still endangered compared to the 10,000 count in 1900s. And of course, it's a rare mountain grassland ecosystem. Okay? So that we could actually appreciate more what the Mindoro biogeographic region is. Now here's an interesting map. If we're going to divide certain plants and animals and form countries, this is what the biogeographic region would look like for the Philippines. There are actually 15 more that you can find. So Batanes has their own plants and animals, for example. Coron in letter G has their own, and Mindoro is in the middle. Okay? So that's where the park is located. It's really in the middle of Mindoro Island. There are major watersheds in there. It stabilizes the climate, and we're adding the cultural aspect. It's the ancestral domain of the Mangyans. So another picture, if you go to Mindoro, this is how it looks like. Beautiful grasslands. And it's hard to say that there's no one living there, because every morning when I wake up, you would see smoke coming up, and you know that they're making breakfast. No? So, but nobody has really explored that area because of ancestral domain issues, and it's just really difficult to go inside the terrain. No? This is the land cover. It's really more than 70% grassland. Yeah. And of course, the Tamaraw habitat, they are concentrated on this part of the park. And that's the picture of the Tamaraw. This is what they do all day. They like sitting in the mud. So they only come out during sunset and sunrise. So if you go to Mount Iglit-Baco National Park, you have a 100% chance of seeing Tamaraw. They come out and then they just disappear again. So, and these are the Taubuid Mangyans that we encounter when we do a bit of exploring. So this is the Upland Mangyans, and yeah, there's a divide. I'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah. So anyway, that's the typical house. The granary is here. Just a bit of anthropology. Why the rice granary is always separate is because if the whole village just burns down, at least the food is safe. No? That's almost every tribe has that concept. And yeah, I think it's high enough that the rats won't really reach the top. So how do we manage this? That's the question, because a very rich heritage for the Philippines. And then if you're the park manager, and in the almost 2 years that I stayed there, I was able to identify management approaches. Socioeconomic, we're hoping that through tourism and economic substitution, we're able to give a different kind of livelihood to the lowland villages, so they don't hunt and they don't extract the natural resources. We'll talk about that some other time. I have pictures here. Yeah, the economic substitution is the swine production. We'll talk about that next time because I'd like to focus more on the interesting part. I think there should be a joint approach in managing the site, joint scientific and anthropological. For science, they're now trying to combine a way by which the Tamaraws and the Mangyans can actually share the same space. So this means studying the traditional agroforestry management and fire ecology of the Mangyans. So I'll show you this picture. This was in April of that year. I don't know if it's 2012 or 2013. A freshly burnt hill. So that's how it looks like. And some of the rangers, they really disagree that kaingin should be stopped because it exposes the Tamaraw like this, and it's just easy for hunters to shoot them. No? But is that really a problem? Why would we stop kaingin now when the Mangyans were actually doing it many, many centuries ago, maybe? So that's one question that I try to find out. That's why that's me, and this is the Punong Tribo, Fausto Neveloso. I tried to interview him and ask certain changes in the aspect of the Mangyan, no? And I was able to find these basic issues. They're still fighting for their claim on ancestral domain. And I think not just Mangyans, no, it's almost all the indigenous groups. They're still elusive. They don't like to interact with anyone outside the village. So if I accidentally enter their villages, the women and children will be shouting. They would all be panicked, because they believe that we carry bad spirits, or we don't know. We'll talk about something else, because maybe there's a collective memory there that says that maybe the lowlanders are enemies. So we don't know. But then, of course, there's discrimination from the lowlanders. And of course, the most controversial of all is the prohibition of the slash and burn agriculture, or the kaingin. So thanks to Manu, the French scientist, he was able to take photos of the kaingin cycle. Very, very similar to Harold Conklin's study of the Hanuno'o Mangyan, kaingin cycle. So you have a freshly burned plot, which is immediately planted with kamote and other root crops. And then you abandon it for a while, and then there's going to be a young forest surviving. So for him, it's actually quite sustainable. The question now is, why will the Tauboid Mangyans not complete the cycle and they just start burning the land again? Why is that bad? Because it actually destroys the watersheds. In the last few years, the lowland Mindoreños, they find out why is it always flooding in the lowlands now. So they must have connected the watershed destruction, which is caused by kaingin. Yeah, it's here. And there are, okay, we still have a few minutes left. No? Some of the reasons, there's actually many, many reasons that the Tauboid Mangyan has enumerated. One is, just an example, they're still nomadic, by the way. They would extract the minerals of the soil at a certain time, and then they move. So the problem is, when they go back to the first place, they find out that there are now lowland Filipinos actually living there. So since they don't like something like that to happen, they just keep burning the lands again. And some of them are actually forced to settle. Instead of just moving the way they used to, some of them are forced to settle. So here, it would be interesting to also study the demographic history of Mindoro, no? That they were thought to be living in the lowlands, the pre-Hispanic period. There's a connection. I think Mindoro is called Mai, right? I'm not sure if it's Luzon or Mindoro. But anyway, it was only in 1920s when the Mangyans became a cultural minority in their own land. And this was during the American Commonwealth period, when they discovered that there's a lot of trees in there, let's go cut them, but we need people. So there's an influx of, migrants that came to Mindoro. So by that time, the Mangyans were pushed inside the hinterlands of Mindoro Island. No? And of course, during the Marcos government, that's when more settlers came in. So you have places in Mindoro called New Dagupan or New Ilocos. So I believe it's one way of ensuring that Marcos actually has, I think it's the same thing that they did in Bangsamoro region, right? So anyway, around this time, the Mangyans started claiming their ancestral domain, titles. So how does the future look like for Mount Iglit-Baco National Park? Manu and Sir Rodel were talking about a shared landscape between Mangyans and the Tamaraws. The Mangyan's culture, several aspects of their culture has changed. And according to science, Tamaraws, they don't like disturbance because they prefer to just be sitting in the mud. But with more and more maybe tourists or even the population of Mangyans increasing, how do you actually share that? So that's probably for another lecture. No, but there's now a space share that we're trying to design. Okay. Another proposal for archaeology, because perhaps through archaeology we can better understand the landscape of Mindoro. No? We're trying to establish the link between the burning and the creation of the Iglit-Baco National Park. Who here believe that maybe we should just stop the kaingin altogether? Can raise your hands, no? The problem there is if we do stop the kaingin, the trees will go back. It's a natural cycle. It will recover. But then this is not the suitable habitat for ungulates. For Usa or for Tamaraw, they prefer grasslands. So there's going to be a balance. But then the use of fire should be regulated. So at the same time, yeah, we're trying to get a sample of the soil to see how long the kaingin has been going. Because we will see when the Mindoro interior has actually changed into this kind of landscape. So just a conclusion, the importance of cultural heritage mapping, the role of archaeology, and this is what I'd like to recommend, just a registry of Philippine indigenous cultural landscapes, and most important, there should be a collaboration in managing sites. You have archaeologists helping, urban planners, scientists, fire ecologists, and scientists. And last, just in the interest of World Heritage inscription, it should be a mixed property. It cannot be just purely natural site, especially since there are Mangyans living in there. So, yeah, that's a thank you slide. Thank you so much for your time. Yep.
Thank you very much, Boj. So we have
Yes,
time for a few questions before we proceed to the next lecture. Mr. Capati can answer the questions. We have time for the side. Any questions you'd like to ask?
How does the life of the tao how are they linked to the tamaraw? And question number 2, it's a silly question. Do they actually eat the tamaraw as food or?
Okay. Well, the assumption is the Tamaraw are originally found all over Mindoro. But because of migration and, there was pastures that were introduced in 1900s, brought in by the Americans, so it brought pests. So we don't know if it's accidental that the existing Tamaraws now are living side by side with Taoid. So for me, that's how I would imagine it. It's just accidental that the existing ones are in the ancestral domains of the Taoid Mangyans. So, but I'd like to believe that there's a connection between them, their burning the kaingin and the ecosystem. Because if you go for, I checked other sites. For instance, in Kaziranga National Park in Nepal, the grass can get super tangled sometimes. That even the rhinoceros, the one-horned rhinoceros, another endangered species, couldn't even penetrate the very thick grass. So the tribes have no choice but to, let's burn it. It's a way to have a reset button. And then animals can move again. So that's what we're trying to link. Now, regarding the question number 2, if they know that there are existing laws now protecting wildlife, the Wildlife Conservation Act. So, yeah, I don't think they actually, there has been a report saying that they eat and hunt the tamaraw. So, I hope that answers the question.
was part of their diet before?
Sir, that's what we're trying to establish. There are mammals, how do you say, experts. We're trying to go inside the interior of Mindoro to find out if there are other species that are still undiscovered. Because true enough, they need protein. Where do they get their protein? So maybe if not the endangered species, it could be something else. Maybe it's baboy damo. Yeah. So we're still trying to find out. By the way, so if there are students here of biology, ecology, and you're looking for a thesis, we know the people to connect you here in Mount Iglit. That's the importance of research. We should keep researching. That's why. Yeah.
So they're not a planting community.
Sorry?
They're not planting.
Uh,
So they're nomadic.
They're nomadic because, well, they're planting kamote. So they burn the slash and burn is, the first cycle, they burn it around March. Because of the heat, the leaves and the branches dry. And the carbon becomes fertilizer for the plot. So that's where they plant. Unfortunately, unlike maybe, they're asking how come they didn't get the rice terrace, the terracing culture like the ones in Ifugao. It doesn't get a lot of rain, and the elevation is not that high. That's why the watersheds won't really have that water-rich system that can feed the terraces. So the only option is to just really burn them for now. But I have people from, I've heard of students from UPLB Agriculture who are saying that there are alternatives to kainin. So, yes, sir.
So in Laguna, I was from Laguna. They also burn our forest for the carabao. So, kasi minsan yung mga tao dito yung kugon, matataas na. So, ginagawa ng mga farmers, sinusunod talaga yun para makakain yung carabao nila. So, yun. And kay Ngeras din kami dati, pero talagang para madali gamasin yung sinusunog yung bundok para matamnan ng mga pagkain.
So, actually yung pagsusunog talaga, kahit sa US, the Native Americans, there's a certain height ng grass na kailangan na talaga sunugin. Kasi once na magtamaan ng kidlat, mas delikadong i-control. Kaya the fire is not something that we should be afraid of. There are parks in the US, for instance, na they stop the forest fires in parks, but then they realize there are some seeds in the very, very tall trees that they need fire to crack them para masabog. But then, yun ang mistake, because that's why you have to keep studying it. So, yeah, let's not be afraid of fire. But maybe that's why here, in the case of Mount Iglit-Baco, we just have to check what has changed in their culture. The families are also getting bigger. So meaning when you have more mouths to feed, you need to produce more food, and more food means more lands to burn. So that's another aspect of the Mount Iglit-Baco National Park.
What is the best tourism activities that you can do there in the same time that can support development and at the same time sustain the environment?
Tamaraw watching is, unless there's monsoon, some of the rivers become really, you cannot pass them. They get too deep and dangerous. Hiking, it's very easy to hike. We just need to, find out exactly which trails are still can be developed all year round. But Manu, the scientist, he prefers to keep it regulated. So perhaps there are some times during the year when it has to be closed. So for the forest to recover, maybe. Kasi I don't think it can sustain that many tourists all at the same time. So in terms of benefiting the local communities, when you go to Poy Poy and Malpalon, there will be guides for you, waiting for you there, or porters. So yeah, that's exactly. Yes.
What about the population of the Mangyans?
Are they on the increasing side or on the decreasing?
Yes, actually they're on the increasing side. And because they're receiving help from us, which is good for them, no? Medicine, nutrition, etc. We just need to see how this would fit in the future, where you have the tamaraws easily irritated by human presence, and for them, they don't have any choice but to stay on the hinterlands because, well, they have Mindoreños who actually now occupy their lowland villages. So there's so many issues involved. So I just don't wanna. We can talk later about the little details, but that's the concept. It's really about the space share. So yeah. Yes.
You mentioned about regulating things and how much time does a forest or a mountain needs to recover?
Yeah, they say it's 1 year. To be honest, there's no in-depth study yet of the kainin. That's why if there are anthropologists, please let's try to work together. I know that they burn every year. So we don't know if that's already one cycle or if it's just one part of a phase. Because like I said, they're supposed to be moving certain areas. So when this, I'm sure they also check the consistency of the soil. If it's already, I don't know, I guess less minerals, less suitable for planting, or it's more easily eroded, it's time for them to move. So, but based on experience, in the 2 years I stayed there, every year there's burning. So, but I'm still not sure whether that's one cycle per year or it's just one phase. Yeah. That's why let's go and study. This is what the lectures are about. And I think we have students here, no?
Yes, what's the dominant grass in that area?
Oh gosh, they call it.
Is it cocoon?
No, it's not kugun. All I know is they're higher than us. Really high. That's why tamaraws would love to stay there because it's during the noontime. They don't get.
Is it talahib?
Hindi talahib po eh. Mataas, very high.
What's the difference between Tamaraw and Carabao?
Oh, okay, good question. What's the difference between Tamaraw and the regular Carabao? Let's go back to the, well, definitely they're smaller than the regular Carabao, no? And, yeah, so it's not clear. Yung sungay is V-shaped rather than Carabao style. And they're hairy. They're more hairy.
They get meat.
Mababangis po ang tamaraw. If they see you, they will attack you. So, yeah. So, wala pa nakalapit po sa tamaraw. Yeah.
What's the average lifespan of a tamaraw?
Tamaraw, so they say 30 years. More or less 30. Yung adult, 30, 40. Kalibasib, although Kalibasib is in captivity, it's the only existing tamaraw. I think nag-birthday siya yesterday, 30 years old na siya. Or 20. I gotta check again, sorry. Yeah. Yes,
Thank you very much for an informative presentation. It's like I went to another place because that's what it looks like. It looks like another country, right? It doesn't look like it's part of the Philippines. So we're all thinking, how do we go there? I want to walk on that hill. But we're thinking, but my question is something a little bit more prosaic. I'm glad you're doing research on this. We look at this landscape and it's beautiful. And we are all here in Manila, and we all know what Manila is. It's a mega city. So my question is, why is this important to us in Manila, or more generally to all Filipinos? What is the value of protecting these national parks?
It's, I guess, heritage, the natural heritage of Mindoro. It's something that we can be proud of as Filipinos. It's when we start protecting these places, when it actually reflects to us Filipinos that we care about the richness of our biodiversity and the cultural diversity. So the how do you say, the efforts to make us more aware of the Tamaraw has started way back in 1990s. You remember the piso before, it was a Tamaraw. And then the Tamaraw FX is also named after Tamaraw. FEU Tamaraws is also part of this. So, and then every October it's a Tamaraw month. And the same way perhaps that we're trying to do with the feeling you get when you see vegan, for example. That I'm very proud to be Filipino because of a place like Vegan or the rice terraces. It's the same that we're trying to do with Iglit-Baco National Park. So, and I hope that, I know it's not really the most popular place yet in the Philippines, but I guess this is the purpose of our this day. Yeah?
Sana it won't be.
Yeah.
To help preserve it.
So it's all about heritage and what makes us Filipinos. So, okay.
A follow-up question concerning also, I mean, similar to what she's. We're talking about cultural landscape, right?
Yeah.
So on my end, what's the best way or a possible way for each and every individual to actually contribute to the preservation of this cultural landscape? How can we help actually? Yes, we are aware,
Yeah.
but we're here in Manila, we are aware. Other places like if you're in Cebu or in Mindanao, how can we actually contribute?
Well, definitely there's a need for heritage education. I think you start to care about it when you're aware how valuable it is. So that's one. And then I guess there's different levels of caring. For us, I think we start with lectures like this for people not living in Mindoro. We get to know what these places are. We talk to them. We talk to foreigners and other Filipinos about it. They start to visit. It brings perhaps income to the local communities. That's one aspect. But we talk about the actual people living next to the park, and that actually needs more attention because when I was interviewing the lowland villages, I would notice that there's an apparent how do you say, they're living next to each other, but the lowland Filipinos have no idea about Mangyan culture, and you have these Mangyans who have been perhaps traumatized through history, and they're not connecting. So, part of the management and as a site manager, you have to address this issue, because the Mangyans, for example, I'd like to burn this. You know, this is what I do, but we're flooding here in the lowlands. So, I think it's time that there should be a care between the lowlands and the indigenous people. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question. Yes.
I'm very from Pilipinas. I just couldn't help myself but respond. But first of all, what you're doing is great. But juxtaposing the Mangyan with the Tamaraw, I think is the wrong, how do you call it, a red herring. No? Your last statement that the Kaingin is the one causing the flooding in the lowlands. No? You're forgetting history. The Mangyans and the Tamaraws have been coexisting, no? Long before in the lowlands. The reason they're now where they are is because of what you also had presented, is the migration of lowlanders from different parts of the Philippines. Okay, so what what we're seeing now is the effect. No? So if we don't solve the problems of encroachment by the lowlanders, they'll just keep on being pushed up. No? So the practices of the Mangyans, and there are many different groups of Mangyans. Tao Buhid is just one. So I think by presenting this conflict, supposed conflict between Mangyans and Tamaraw is the wrong one. Because they've been, as I've said, they've been coexisting in the past. Burning is a cycle, if there's no lowlanders in Mindoro, just the number of Mangyans, you know, in that area would be sufficient, you know, to maintain that cycle. You know. You forgot to mention that logging had gone into that area long before. You know. So how do you build those factors? Okay? So by trying to make Mangyans and Tamaraws coexist in a very small place that is continuously being decreased by lowland activities, I think you'll end up making false images of solutions instead of trying to address the real problem. No? There are other problems in Mindoro: mining, no? Expansion of agriculture, and these are all from the outside. So I think blaming the Mangyan for the problems of the lowlanders is totally wrong. No? Okay?
Yes, thank you for that, sir. I guess I have to clarify that point because we don't really connect the flooding with the.
But you just said it.
Yes, but it's that's why I'm talking about the collaboration. So we have somebody from sciences and also someone addressing the this conflict. That's why I have to really emphasize that it should be all aspects of study trying to help the management issue. So it's really helping together. So what I just said now, perhaps maybe it's the wrong way of saying it. The kaingin is I know it's an after effect. But then we know that also the Mangyans have no choice, especially since from the time of the Spanish when they were pushed in the interior. If you're perhaps we could invite someone like a development planner or an anthropologist who can actually address this. So it's not just science; it has to be also history and anthropology. So I hope that clarifies what I'm trying to say. So. It's a collaboration that we're trying to do. It couldn't be just one aspect of study.
Just stop blaming the Mangyans.
Yes, I'm not blaming the Mangyans. Actually, the reason why I had to go the other direction in my thesis is because I couldn't really get substantial information from them because they don't want to be interviewed. So I thought maybe the elusiveness. I'm gonna stop there and then find out who I can ask. And then I go to the lowland villages. And then that's when I start finding out, ay, sila po, kapag may bagyo dito, ang una pong tinutulungan, sila kami, hindi man kami tinutulungan. So, and then I asked them if they talk to the Mangyans that they meet. Some of them, very seldom, some not so much. So, we also want to find out why this thing is going on, especially since they've been living there for decades. How come they never really try to understand their Mangyan neighbors?
So no Mangyans becoming urban?
There are those, that's another aspect that I found. Some Mangyans, for example, they discourage their children to go to school because many who stayed until high school, sabi nila, they don't go back to the farms anymore. So that's why, again, perhaps they're learning something different from the lowlands that they don't want to apply anymore pagdating nila sa pag-uwi. So the issues are actually many. So, and if you're as a manager of the site, these are things that you have to consider. So I was there and I tried to talk to as many people as I can. And yeah, perhaps this is the way I said it. So I'm not blaming for the Mangyans. I know they're an important aspect of the ecosystem. So, other comments or questions?
How do we get a copy of your thesis?
It's in Chinese pa. So, sorry. I can translate po yung important parts. Yeah.
So that we can read it.
Yes.
Also, this is going to be in the These lectures are going to be in the YouTube channel of ICOMOS Philippines. No? So when can we expect that to happen? Maybe in a month, a couple of weeks, or 2 weeks. So Boj's lecture and Susan's lecture are going to be features of that channel. Just go to YouTube and just look for ICOMOS Philippines.